Well, good afternoon, everybody. We are lighting the candle, a world that works. Once again, Bill Carell here with from the upper left going clockwise on my screen. We're starting with our buddy at Jan Jeremias, our buddy Ken Caputo, and then down the lower left, our buddy at Lisa Sheehan. So here we are. And the first thing I want to mention is number one, this is episode number 99.
Woohoo.
Huh, that's cool.
Yeah, I know. And so the other thing is that yesterday was my birthday. I was not 99.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. So the other thing is that uh, not really having too much time to think about what we would talk about. That's not a new thing. But I'm interested now in probably, especially with this group. And you know that anytime you make a really nice stew, the different ingredients make all the difference. The amount of time that it simmers, the experience that you have from doing it earlier, how many times you've reheated it. I think all of those things go into having a really good and powerful tasting stew. So we may have talked about this before, but I want to represence with this group in this time with what's going on in the world, the whole notion of partnership. Um, Partnership, you know, probably with a layer of leadership, with a layer of, you know, vision for the future, and anything else that you'd like to bring to it. But more than anything, I would like to just examine the whole notion of partnership here today and what some really powerful interpretations might bring to our listeners in terms of what they're seeing, hearing. And the other thing I want to presence is I have been watching a little bit of television, and I've noticed that we're in this cycle of where it's very important to ask a 4 or 5 part question. If a person asking a question of the panel isn't taking at least 30 seconds, there's almost something wrong. Okay. So by the end of it, they have enough things to grab onto. But in this case, what does partnership mean to you?
I'll just grasp at something, or just the first thing that came to mind was a sharing of ideals and ideas.
Yes.
We probably should look up the actual definition.
Sounds good. And while we're doing that, what does it seem like it means, Jan?
What I first thought of is, well, what does it mean as far as partnership? Like, are we talking personal partnerships, relationships, or we talk, well, which are relationships anyway, but personally or business? And my first place that I went is, could you partner with yourself? Like the idea of partnering with yourself on something. I think we go through life and we kind of a lot of times don't partner with ourselves.
Please say some more. I think that's an interesting thing to share.
That we don't partner with ourselves. We either don't follow our intuition, or we are so focused on what everybody else is saying we should do versus actually partnering with ourselves upon what we feel we should be doing.
It's a very interesting thing. I went out to dinner last night at our local sushi bar, Asian Bistro, and there was a young man that was sitting there, and he, confided in me that he spent the last 5 years really going nowhere. And I asked him, I says, well, what does that mean to you? He says, I haven't been able to find myself. And I don't know how old he is. I'm going to guess right around 30 years old, say. But finding ourselves was something we used to do back in the 60s. I don't know anybody that had a lot of success at it, but it usually was an experience driven decision to go out and do things intentionally that you knew were not all that good for your future, so that you could decide that that wasn't it, you know? And I just recall this whole notion of what you're saying right now. It has a really cool Zen aspect to it. in that if you could stand next to yourself and throw your shoulder over who you are with that other self, in what ways are the talents that you have not in service to the goals or the objectives or the actions that you're currently taking right now? That kind of partnership with yourself, and I love the word self because most of us, when we start out with a lowercase, not a proper noun self, and with a little bit of skin, knees, and experience, and a lifetime of doing things well and not doing things so well, and learning from it, we start to build a stronger S, till it becomes a capital at some point in the future. And one of my teachers, when using this model or this metaphor, would say that the stronger your S is. I love the way she said it too. The stronger your S is, the more unmessable you are. So partnering with yourself is an ideal a place to begin. Lisa, did you find a textbook definition?
We
I
might as well
wrote a
define.
definition down.
We might as well define it ourselves for how descriptive it is.
Sure. Go ahead, Ken. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I like made up my own definition
Oh, good.
and wrote it down. So I don't know what
We never do that on this
the
show.
Google says, but so mine was more than one, bringing unique contributions together to produce a result greater than what could be accomplished alone.
Oh, very nice.
I use more than one specifically because it doesn't necessarily have to be like two human beings.
Right.
Partnership can be with anything. It can be with any sentient being, the earth, whatever. Yeah.
Turns out it can be with yourself too, as we've
yeah.
already
Well, we're definitely more than one. At least I am.
Merriam-Webster, the number one definition is the state of being a partner.
Now, see,
That's
there's
boring.
I know.
There's absolutely no way to misinterpret that.
No. Well, yeah, right. In a legal action, the legal action existing between two or more persons, the persons joined together in a partnership. I mean, it really is a relationship resembling a legal partnership and usually involving close cooperation between parties having specified and joint rights and responsibilities.
It also implies an agreement to be in it.
Mm-hmm.
You're you may find yourself accidentally in a partnership, and it will become a partnership the moment that you acknowledge that that's what it is. What causes something to spring into being. It's when it's being acknowledged in the presence, in the speaking, in the listening. So kind of a neat thing. You think about partner. It could be on the dance floor. It could be flying a kite. It could be having a spelling bee. It could be playing bridge. Your mind can just keep going here. Where else do we create partners?
I think there's partnerships all around us if you're paying attention. I mean, it feels like that's been a theme for me anyway. The love is there. It's just the noticing of it, and it's interesting because how often right now, if you just think on the human level, there are probably people that you are in partnership that you'll never meet or even have any interaction with. So we would do like a meditation where you eat an orange and you start with the sunlight and all the things, all the partnerships that had to have been created, all the contributions that brought that orange to you in that moment so that you could consume it, and there's partnerships with orange growers and, the natural order of creating it and who shipped it and people that developed money that allowed you to purchase it instead of having to trade for all that stuff. It's an interesting practice.
It does seem to imply a little bit of being awake, and not necessarily an accident. Although, and it can be as a result of an accident or in the commission of an accident or the experiencing of an accident. The kind of neat thing, I'm getting a telephone call, probably from a family member wishing me happy birthday one day late. So the partnership agreement that I wrote with my first corporate partner at Progressive Data Systems on of all dates, March 17th, 1990, St. Patrick's Day, and it actually was a partnership agreement. And in that agreement, it actually spelled out in no uncertain terms what our obligations were, what our rights were, the legal aspects of forming a sub-S corporation. So I think it's a little more rare to have that experience of sitting down and designing a partnership from that aspect, where it's a legal document that kind of holds our futures in alignment and also bound inextricably without another legal document to end that relationship and the promises that we make to each other. So in terms of a partnership at a group level, we don't have to go to community or the world or any of that stuff yet. Are there any kind of unspoken rules of the road?
I can give you an example.
Sure.
It's so we have, through the martial arts school, we have a leadership program that basically allows participants to move up through a process of all the way up to employment, if they want, which to me is a great form of partnership. You've got the partnership between, the business, the owners of the business, and the people, the team that helps that business continue to provide its service. So we have a three-part process, and it's cultivation, contribution, collaboration. So they start first in cultivation, which is learning to be skillful for themselves. So developing internal and external leadership skills and applying them in their own life until they're ready to make a contribution, which would be helping other people learn to apply those things in their lives. So we start with personal cultivation, then it goes into basically giving that away to the benefit of others skillfully. And then the third part would be collaboration, and that would be when we hire them. So now we kind of formalize the relationship and establish guidelines and boundaries for how we're going to produce a specific result, which is helping people live their best lives, be their best selves, and do their best work through the martial arts. So the agreement is cultivate for yourself, become a skillful contributor, and then understand how to collaborate appropriately and effectively.
So Lisa, what do you got?
Oh, that's a lot. That's good. I like what Ken said. I also like what Jan said too regarding we're partnering all the time, like every moment of even at night in our dream world, but you're partnering with life itself every moment. So what that brings to you is is creating your own reality. So to take responsibility for that in every moment, and then where you could get to the point where you could be part of Ken's building of collaboration and partnership.
So I'm listening to the what's not being talked about, the partnership that most people don't feel. Have you ever heard anybody complaining about how alone they are in the world when there's hundreds of people around them?
Mm-hmm.
That what they're present to is there's no one here who's all that interested in what happens to me. And a lot of what gets talked about, unfortunately, is coming from that small conversation. And it has to go through almost this communication collaboration that Ken's talking about, to where there's something being passed on from someone to someone, and then it gets regenerated after there's some sort of competence or some sort of familiarity, or maybe just a little bit of understanding, and that gives you the experimentation phase of it, where you kind of go out and take your show on the road to find out whether or not you're actually reproducing, the personalized outcome that comes from that collaboration and partnership. So the interesting thing is, um, in groups of people, I'm just kind of wondering if, when somebody shows up for a town meeting, if there are subsets of partnerships, if there's a sense of partnership being generated for the whole group, like if there's 50 or 60 people there and they all have disparate ideas, or there seems to be one or two major ideas, how does a partnership get generated in those circumstances? And this is probably useless in conversation, but probably very useful in terms of when people are in a situation and it seems like a larger version of nobody around here is all that interested in me, which I think is, in those types of circumstances, a lot of what walks through the door in some cases.
Wonder if it's worth considering, is there a difference between a partnership and an alliance? Because I think a lot of times, you go to that town meeting and there are objectives people have, for themselves or for a group or whatever, and they may form an alliance with others who can help move them towards that objective, especially if they're experience resistance from like a counter objective. You got polarization, which is very human. But I'm just curious about thoughts on those two words, and are they similar? Are they different? What separates them?
To me, what
It's
separates them is, sorry, Bill. To me, what
that's
separates them is sort of like, I don't want to say, but the higher objective, or the higher, I don't like the word goal, but the higher, like, higher reasoning of what's going to come about. Like, does an alliance per se, does a partnership mean that you're partnering toward this, you know, whatever, this greater good? I don't know what exactly to call it, versus an alliance. Like, I'm just wondering if that, to me, that would play into effect, but I'm not sure. I mean, I'd love to hear your guys' feedback. Like, what is the overall goal or the reasoning for that partnership, especially when you're dealing with two polar opposite things? Like, is it really for the greater good? you know, or is it really just like a personal objective toward like what's going to be better for you?
it's
It's
like
funny.
on
Like
a
I have a
continuum
partnership
of.
right. Oh, sorry, Bill.
That's all right.
I
This
couldn't
is a
hear you in
very
my ear.
imperfect platform, so we by definition must step on each other's lines every once
Yeah.
in a while. I think what's interesting is that every word has a unique place in language, or it disappears. So I think the distinction between partnership and alliance is almost on a continuum of involvement and having some sort of shared something or other with other people, places, persons, whatever, things. But the key distinction, in the way that I look at partnership versus alliance, um, is a little bit kind of like, the breakfast plate. The distinction between the pig and the chicken. You know that the chicken is interested, but the pig is committed. So there's almost like an action difference associated with a partnership, where it's clear and present at all times. And an alliance is more or less an agreement to bring into being that partnership activity at some point if it's called for. Like, for instance, if you look at the members, the 39 or 40 members of NATO right now. They all thought they were signing up for a protectorate of stronger as a group than as individuals. And yet there aren't many of them that could stand against a major force alone, you know? So that's more of an alliance as opposed to a partnership until they've chosen to do work together. Once the work is on the table and they are in action doing that, I would say that that's where it turns from an alliance where we've promised something in the future under certain circumstances, and we'll bring the following things that we've agreed to into play, or that's dormant if there's no cause for us to be to execute in a partnership way our promises in that alliance.
The word Merriam-Webster throws in there is bond, a bond between, a bond or connection between for alliance.
Yep.
For alliance, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny because as we're talking about it, I'm reflecting on the fact that a partnership, there's a level of trust. Like I won't have a partnership if there isn't trust and shared belief that we're moving towards something that's very common to us both in our values. Like, I'm working with someone on a startup right now. We're at a point where we're ready to actually do a course that'll be monetized. And we had our first disagreement. And the disagreement was about the fact that I feel he should get a higher share of the revenue generated from it, and he thinks I should get a higher share. So,
That's horrible.
and we're both, because it's not about the money for us. And of course, money is energy, and it's important for us to, expand the impact of this project. But we each place a higher value on each other, and that's the kind of partnership I want. I've been in other partnerships that didn't go well because it was always a negotiation where you had to fight to get enough, and they're competing with you to take more, and some people really like that kind of partnership. So I'm not judging it. It's just interesting. Um, and then on the flip side, we're looking at investors for scaling Questor's Way, and that's probably going to be an alliance where, they're looking for a specific outcome and they're willing to bring revenue in to get revenue out, whereas we're looking at revenue as the thing that allows us to again expand impact. But we can work together towards a common goal and trust the fact that we're going to behave in a consistent fashion, but it's not going to be a partnership really. It's temporary, we'll mutually benefit, and then we'll move on. So the bond part is kind of interesting to me because that's not a word I would have thought to associate with an alliance.
Well, I think it's perfect, as a matter of fact, to discover, in the conversation that a word that is very, very common to all of us may have a different meaning, and it probably has different meanings in different contexts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you think about, what an alliance is, like a union or a guild or a fellowship or a congregation or all these different groups of people, when you go to church you're actually in an alliance with the rest of the people that are there and all the other people who've ever been there and ever will go there, and it's not something that's ever talked about in terms of that until there's work to be done. It's kind of an interesting thing. And one of the sermons that I can recall at the Episcopal Church down here probably 20-25 years ago was talking about George Washington's speech when he left office, which warned the people who were going to be making the laws and protecting the country to refrain from entangling alliances. And that implication is that to be knowledgeable and to be very cognizant of the bonds that you're making with people so that you're not writing an open-ended check with whatever may come and committing resources that you have no intention to ever expend. So that all came somehow back into a stewardship conversation about fundraising for the annual, budget. But it was very kind of an interesting take at alliance that I don't think most people who go to church would ever consider. So what other words would be on that continuum? Association,
Affinity is another one they threw in there.
affinity. What else you got, Lisa?
Accord, covenant, compact,
Yep.
pact, treaty. So then the line that to me makes the lines more blurred with those synonyms.
Yep.
Because if you enter into a treaty, then it's to me that if you've written something down, then it seems to be more of a partnership than an alliance.
Wouldn't that be the evidence of the bond, is to have something written and signed that we're pledging to do this together, and now we'll put that aside and go about the rest of our work until it's ever necessary for us to act on it.
I think a lot of personal alliances they might be implied but
Right.
there's nothing written. I mean, I belong to a church where you became a member, but I don't remember that when I was growing up. You were just born into it, kind of thing. So which one is, good, bad, or indifferent? It doesn't matter, but I knew what I wanted to be part of, so it made a difference to me that I was acknowledged as a member.
Yeah, I don't remember anybody ever asking my opinion on Sunday mornings as I was getting my little tiny suit on and my tie and all the rest of that stuff with my brothers and sisters and heading off to
Right.
Our Lady of Lords.
Seth Godin wrote a great book called Tribes, and it talks about the things that bring us together, and he was talking in terms of mainly like being generous in contributions and through business and creating things that have value, and he's like such an intelligent human, just he's amazing to read and listen to in his podcasts and stuff. But anyway, it's kind of interesting because I think that he would be much more interested in partnerships than alliances, because it's about that feeling of community and culture and connection where everybody feels a part of something. It's funny, I recently did a Spartan race in Florida, and that's a tribe. Like all these very fit humans running around in mud and throwing spears and climbing up over things and jumping through fire, and it made me want to like buy a T-shirt that said it. I wanted to announce and I'm very not big on that kind of thing, but it struck me, and I thought about his book because they did a great job of creating an experience that helped you feel included,
Yeah.
you know, and it truly was a partnership. They would go out of their way to not just take your money and then it was your job to make it a good experience. They actively made sure that they were creating value and an experience and connection between all the people experiencing it.
Yeah.
It was really kind of neat. So that's a great book, Tribes, if you haven't read it.
I wrote that down.
It's good.
I think inclusion is a great word to go
Mm.
along with alliance too.
Hmm.
Especially, that reciprocal feeling of being part of something.
Yeah.
It's a shared experience, and that experience sometimes can be as short as just a moment or a heartbeat, or it can be a lifetime or anything else. And kind of coming full circle back around to the notion of how human beings interact with each other in groups, especially where they don't know each other all that well. Have you ever noticed that there are certain people that can command attention at the front of the room and very quietly bring everyone else in the room into lockstep, first of all, with their breathing, and then looking around the room and taking a moment to pause, looking at different things. And then at some point along the way, you start seeing the resonance in the whole room, in the crowd, especially if it's not one of these deals where all the chairs are facing in one direction. If there's either people that are standing around or at a basketball, court or something of that nature. The neat part of that is that you start to get the understanding that as people are in compliance and starting to think less in terms of what they have to say without regard to what the response is going to be, um, when they start thinking in terms of what that contribution to the rest of the group is going to be, you can see people that do that, right? They take a moment and instead of just, you know, gorping out whatever bad feeling they showed up to tell everybody about because they're unhappy about this, that, or the other thing, somehow somebody has very quietly and silently put something into the air where there's this level of respect that may not be there if somebody else takes over control of the space and the meeting. Are you guys familiar with what I'm talking about here? So a lot of times it'll happen if there's somebody who's in the room that a lot of the folks already know and already know that whoever this person is going to be very fair-minded, is going to be very level-headed, speak very softly, and when it's time for that person to contribute, they will have listened to everybody who had a different thought. So there's almost like, okay, they're here, we can't behave like, you know, uncouth human beings here. We got to like really listen to each other and give it a shot. So I listened to the different models of leadership that have been talked about recently, and there's this term that's called leading from behind, which in my experience had a very specific nature to it. And now it means something different. And I'm kind of curious, do any of you have any experience with the notion of in a situation where there's clearly some sort of partnership, an alliance, or there's some work to be done together, or we wouldn't be gathering in this group? Are you familiar with the term of in the leadership domain of leading from behind?
Yeah, we use a little bit of a different language, but we, apply that. And one of the things we talk about, especially when you're working as part of a team, one of the most valuable skills that you can develop is the ability to support someone else's ability to lead
Yeah.
through strong leadership. So, and I think that's probably similar. And I always thought of like the Zen concept of no trace, where you create a positive impact on something invisibly without anyone ever knowing you did it. You do it just because you can, with no expectation. So to us, that's like if someone is in the front of a class and you are in support of that class and you're able to keep all of the attention focused on the person leading while simultaneously making it better as a learning experience for the student and for that leading teacher, that's a very powerful thing. So, but I think a lot of times when you hear that term, it's more, like having strong communication skills, having, the ability to not, be the ego or the genius with a thousand helpers, to place other people in a position where they can thrive and flourish, without, I don't know, taking away from their ability to do that, but you're still supporting and helping them.
I think I see that, and again, I'll bring up churches or some churches. Um, our minister will call on or ask people to speak during the service on a particular subject. Putting, she likes to call us all ministers, which we basically are. So to put you in a position where you can feel like you are doing that, and being a bigger partner in the whole church grouping, so it's like leading from behind. She is the minister on record kind of thing, but she wants us all to step up and take the podium as well.
Yeah.
And I guess that if it's true leadership from behind, she's skillfully helping you succeed in that role. And I think to me that's the difference. Like if you're a manager and you have someone that works for you and you're just like, go do that, and then they either fail or succeed, and you either blame or congratulate, you're not
Mm.
really leading. You're just directing, you know? So there's a difference. Have you prepared them properly? Are you Like we have a stage process, this whole thing about teach, support, feedback, accountability, interdependence, and you go through this formula so that you're doing exactly what Bill's talking about. You're providing leadership in a direction which allows them to grow, and also be held accountable for when they screw up, but you're not abandoning them. You're you are very, very intentionally leading them through this process and yourself as well. So
Yeah, the key distinction in terms of that leadership model, in my experience, it has less to do with being the idea person and more to do with being very, very skilled at finding out where the ideas are and drawing the ideas out and drawing the ideas into some sort of tangible form so that the leadership isn't coming from a person or a source. It's coming from the entire group, and you can feel the motion and the momentum and the movement of everybody as they make a decision, and they do all the nonverbal things that basically say, yes, we're headed in the right direction here. There were
also, nothing's beneath you. Like I had a guy tell
oh
me
no,
once, and it stuck with me. He said the best leaders push the biggest brooms. They're, you know, they'll
yeah.
pull up their sleeves. They'll do what needs to be done, and they're not looking for a pat on the back either. They want to see everyone succeed, and the outcome be achieved. So, yeah,
Yeah, the being the example, isn't necessarily even being noticed as being the example.
yeah,
And it's far more powerful when that silent ripple, goes through the room and nobody knows why they're behaving the way they are. It's just like, what's going to happen now, kind of a thing. And there's like this anticipation and maybe a feeling in the collective gut. And then when somebody speaks, it's more worth listening to, if you will.
mhm,
It's like what many people are thinking at the same time. Oh yeah, I'm glad he or she said that because that was on my mind, as opposed to each one making a point, which in a group is a little bit like what did our attracting attention to yourself because you can, and that's what many public groups turn into. Who can attract the most attention? As opposed to how can we make the most progress? How can we get the greatest alignment and association and alliance and partnership? And the really neat thing about it is that people get trained in how to do this powerfully. And there was one training that I went through where we each took turns at the back of the room with somebody who was totally unprepared to lead the group at the front that would be given a task. And then the person at the back, one person at the back, would do nothing other than sit there and very quietly under their breath say, "That's it, be great. That's it, be great. You're as great as the moment calls for. Yeah, you're rocking it. Keep going. Yeah." But mostly silently in their mind, just sending very positive energy and great vibes and smiling face, and affirming type of non-verbal behaviors, and that unbelievably powerful what people reported that they felt like afterwards. And it wasn't anything important. It might be something as mundane as demonstrate to all of these people how to take the piece of gum out of the wrapper in the proper method. And I'm not going to, it's crazy, but the number of people who stood up afterwards and said, "I've never been through a process like that before, but I got goosebumps." The goosebumps came from the nonverbal alliance, the nonverbal resonance, and the symmetry of experience through all the people and the amount of attention that everyone was giving, in this particular instance. And it just left me with, if we could be trained to have that kind of anticipation for any time we're in a group, whether it's family, friend, spouse, church, if we're really just counting on other people's greatness to show up, what the heck would this world look like?
We should do that all the time. It's kind of like I'm a Reiki master, so there are times when people are standing up on a podium and they are so nervous, and because there's a few of us in the audience, that's all we do is sit back there and just send them positive energy.
Yeah.
Um, and it usually you can see the results of it usually. I mean, I've even done it like at funerals when people are having a tough time with eulogies. You send that positive thing for strength and peace and ease to get through it.
Yeah. You take my energy, I'm not using it.
Yeah, exactly.
And don't worry, crunch all you want, we'll make more. So, kind of coming back full around, each of us have had our opportunities to be leaders in a discipline, a practice, organization, company, all those kinds of an environment. And do you have anything to report in terms of the model when you got to a point where things just generally seemed to work? If they did, how was it in terms of in being enjoyable for you? What kind of an experience or what kind of an expression of the work together would you report on when it seemed to be working well and the best? Has anybody got an idea like that or an occurrence like that when that happened for you? Well, Ken, your nod gets you first place here.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just over and over again. I mean, that's kind of our just the way we practice. And and the reality of it is there's kind of funny you were saying about sometimes feeling alone. I think we all experience loneliness. We just have to remember that we're not really alone, but we still are humans who experience loneliness. So, so I think it's the same thing when everything's working well, you experience that sense of connection and feeling productive and empowered and all those things. And, all you can do is, I don't know, we focus on creating designs that make it easier for everyone to make the right choice, the choice they want to make. And sometimes the design breaks and that doesn't happen. And then there's tension or, there's human elements that come in. So it's like chaotic. But in the end, all of the businesses we've done have shared a sense of meaningful human connection and empowered learning. Just we're all teachers and we're all students all the time. And then just the joy of the moment that you're in, best day ever, your present moment awareness. So those things show up and then we forget. Yeah. And then we remember and it comes and goes and we just commit to the practice and the process, you know?
Who else?
Well, I like what Ken said about, because we've spoken about this before about the result, but the actual process of getting there is to stay in those moments too, and not just wait for accomplishing a certain thing and then forgetting about it. This neuroscientist was talking about that we often will feel a sense of postpartum after accomplishing something good, and that we have to remember the the steps that we took, that we actually did make that process happen, and that we can do it again and again and again, and to revel in that kind of partnership feeling. So it doesn't matter how many people, or even if you just accomplished something yourself that was that good. Remember that feeling is great and you can revel in, but you have to acknowledge that great feeling of the whole process so that you can repeat it.
I love it. So what's it feel like for you, Jan, every time there's a cool down?
Alignment. There's a feeling of, I think, connection, alignment. I can't think of the right word. In a way, the word that comes into my mind, which isn't totally the word is satisfaction, which I don't like that word, but something that feels like so right. And I mean, to me, when I thought about alignment and I was thinking of partnership, and I said with yourself, I was thinking of, to begin with, this whole idea of, or this whole feeling of, when we talk about wellness or health and well-being lately, and that is really partnering with yourself on that aspect. I think we've kind of moved, a lot of people have moved away from that. They kind of place all their health and well-being sort of outside of themselves. If that makes sense. And they don't truly partner with themselves toward that health and well-being.
Yeah, I like how you language that. I think most of us have this training in a sense of being a non-integrated being. That there are parts of us. There's this. There's the me that's at home. There's it's disintegrated. In other words. And one of the really neat things that I hear in this opportunity to partner with yourself is the reintegration and bringing forth all that you possess in terms of experience, capacities, capabilities, knowledge, all of it, all of it of all of it.
And I think what differs for me is because if we could each get to that place, and then when we were to partner with other people or form an alliance with other people, we've come as our whole self versus those sort of scattered parts of ourselves. So each one of us is present for the other person as an integrated being.
So it's basically alignment before alliance.
That's right. Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah, it sounds like being a much richer instrument, being more like a Stradivarius than a ukulele. Although they're both really wonderful at what they need to do. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, Lisa, but I thought that would connect with you. Can you imagine if Stradivarius made, or Guarneri, if they had made ukuleles, what would a ukulele look like made by an Italian from the 1500s? So
now I've lost my health. I've lost every thought now.
Everything just kind of brings me back to that. One of my favorite lines in any movie is a great actor saying, you make me want to be a better man. Where does that come from? When you're around somebody that you hold in such esteem, that you're strong enough with who you are that you think you can work on yourself, and the bar is being raised by this partner that you have, or ally, or whatever word it is, that mostly we don't say things like that, do we? Mostly we just work a little bit harder. We show up a little bit earlier. We make sure we're, properly dressed for the occasion, etc.
No, I think we more sit there and just watch the bar staying exactly where it is.
Yeah.
Like don't make me push it, but once you realize you can actually move the bar and it feels good, and somebody makes you feel that way, moving the bar is always a good thing.
Yeah, and again, making that declaration out loud to another human being. Who you are for me is a reminder of what I can do and be on purpose about to make myself more valuable to you as both a partner and as an ally.
Because
I
they say,
don't
like, if you want to bring up movies too, like one of the worst lines in a movie, but everybody loved it though, was "You complete me." And it's not how human beings should be. I mean, it goes back to against everything we've just been saying today. Like, you have to be strong on yourself and all this. You are the one that creates you. It's nobody else's business, basically.
I absolutely love that you said that particular one, because what comes before that, in the Bruce Springsteen song, is when she says, I love him. I love him for the man he is becoming. I love him for the man he wants to be. Not I love him for who he is.
Right. Right. That one I'll push aside.
I think that there were some psychologists that said this is why most, a lot of marriages end up in divorce, because women think they can change the person they're getting married to. And that's just a little bit of humor from Psych 101.
There was a comedian that pointed out like the horribleness of most love songs. Like if you pick apart the lyrics, you go, why would nobody ever feel that way? I'll die without you, or you know what I mean?
Well, it's like most movies that happen about love, which talk about the falling in love part,
Right.
which never really talk about the relationship part. It's always like leading up and getting into the relationship, but not the nitty-gritty of being in a relationship. Because as somebody I once saw an interview, and the guy said that's because if you got into the nitty-gritty, nobody would watch the movie. People don't want to be there. So
we want Hallmark.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Hallmark's easier to digest too.
Yes,
it's kind of funny because like how much of that is caught up in how confusing identity with an experience. So like it wouldn't be a very good movie if you said my connection and partnership to you has given me a sense of completion. That's not going to sell. It might be a more accurate and healthy approach, because there's the both and. I mean, obviously, it's our connections to other people that create, feelings and experiences that we value, that we couldn't achieve on our own because we're not, in isolation. We can be fulfilled within ourselves, but then we can have different experiences of the expression of that fulfillment in partnership with other people. But that would make for a very confusing movie, I think.
And that one that you just described has probably been made many times. With that subtext being completely unapparent to whoever's watching the movie.
Yeah, sure. And actually, and it's funny because Jan said something that you were saying it's hard to describe like the words. And my mentor in spiritual counseling, he's like, that's when you know someone's touching something that's like core because there really aren't words. So you end up just kind of speaking in terms of the symptoms, like feelings of gratitude or satisfaction or whatever it is, but you really can't put it into words. So now we're trying to convey these complex feelings that we all have in a digestible shorthand to kind of, and was it really about the line or was it about the connection that they were trying to portray between two actors, So it's interesting though how it sometimes it hits and sometimes it misses.
Well, as far as relationships, one of the best podcasts or interviews I ever saw was the author was Alain de Botton, and he wrote one of the most read New York Times articles or editorials or something of all times, and it's titled "Why I Will Marry the Wrong Person." And if you listen to the interview, which I'm trying to remember who he did it with for a moment here, her name escapes me, and I love her, but and she interviews him, and it's hysterically funny. I mean, he's really funny, and he talks about, how we go into a relationship and that whole idea of. So I can send it out to you guys because it's really
Yeah, no, I would love to check that out. That sounds fun.
Yeah, it's really good.
It's really kind of a cultural deal that we get into relationships and partnerships and marriages and all the rest of that with the hope that the other person will turn out to be the person we're supposed to be with, as opposed to rolling the sleeves up in a particular way and doing the work that it takes to be the partner that causes that relationship to endure through time. And most of the people that I have interviewed, at one point back in the 80s and the 90s, I was collecting couples. I was collecting people, that had been married at least 40 years. The all-time winners were actually this beautiful couple who had been married for 67 years when I met them, and we celebrated their 75th wedding anniversary together. And yes, you can do the math. They both lived until late 90s, and it was one of the most impressive things to hear either one of these two people talk. You would never in 100 years have put them together. Not one. No, I mean, no, that can't happen. He can't be with her. Are you kidding me? His praise of her was, I wouldn't trade her for a spotted dog.
And I looked it up. So he was interviewed by Krista Tippett
Yeah.
of onbeing.org. And so
there we are.
I wonder if sometimes it's forgetting the nature of impermanence that can put pressure on relationships. It's like as soon as you were mentioning, Bill, a couple together for 67 years, I was thinking about my grandparents who were like that. But then I flashed to my mentor, who it was his third marriage, where he found a love so powerful that his daughter from his second marriage said all she needed to do to understand everything there was to know about love was to look at John looking at Cecilia. And he had two relationships that were both beautiful, and then he was hysterical. His first wife introduced him to his second wife, said she would be a better fit for you after they had divorced. And it's just, and knowing John, Bill, I'm sure.
Absolutely. There's a famous handoff from George Harrison to Eric Clapton, where
Sorry,
literally said, "Take my wife, please."
right.
Yeah, no, but it was an interesting thing because there's so many ways it can express, and in the end, what struck me is they all have beginnings and they have middles and they all have endings. It's somehow every relationship, no matter how powerful, beautiful, meaningful, it will change and it will end, and we don't get to choose when that will be.
And for most people, it's not while they're still alive.
Mhm.
That relationship goes on and on and on, in every conversation that gets brought up, every memory, you know.
Yeah.
And the other neat thing that's kind of cool too is I've also met a lot of people that have been married multiple times. They just like being married, okay? Uh, and in many cases, it's like, yeah, we did that for a little while. It was a lot of fun. We got a lot of laughs, that sort of deal. But then the stories that they shared, and then talking about what they really miss about that person that they were first married to 35, 40 years ago, you know?
Mhm.
And I think it's really revealing about the speaker. Probably tells me nothing at all about the person they're talking about, but what you do remember and what you report to other people about a relationship from the past really is very generous in terms of shining a light on something that's important enough for you to commit to speech right this minute, you know?
Mm.
And then again, that does live on in this moment because it's being spoken.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Yeah, that's another little tip. Here's a pointer for y'all to take home. Every time you're thrown to tell people about how miserable she was 25, 30 years ago, swallow that thought and then compliment the crap out of her and see what that feels like.
That would be cool.
Give it a shot. Anyhow, So we've really covered the beach on going back to partnership in a completely different way. Now, you all agree, right? This is a different stew than anyone we've ever made before.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I think these conversations, I love the Gino Oriema quote that you can never dip your toe into the same river twice. And I think that that's, having heard that at some point and then sitting on the side of a river to really try to fully appreciate what that actually means, and what that means for me and what it means for me in the moment and what it means for me in the not knowing and the discovery and, the challenge and the question. If we take a little bit of time to do that, what did I say earlier about being unmessable? I think that's a goal worth having in my book. Keep working on that S. Make that son of a gun big and strong, and make that S somebody that you would be proud to give as a gift to another human being or group of human beings. With that said, closing remarks from our esteemed panel.
Reflect on every partnership you have. Again, it comes back to being in the moment. So whatever partnership you're dealing with in the moment, just acknowledge it and bring it back to your big self.
That capital S.
Mhm.
And you can even have fun with a font.
And I was just thinking, kind of working off what Lisa said, bring your best self forward.
Mr. C?
I got nothing. I'll just leave some space.
Yeah, I guess we could appropriately spend about 30 seconds here in silence and drive our producer nuts, but
Yeah.
we love you, Eric. And in the meantime, folks, thank you again for tuning in and listening to this conversation and actively participating by sending us your energy here in the past from your future. And we absolutely love it. So thank you. And this is episode 99, ladies and gentlemen. With that said, we'll speak again soon. And the next one is going to be in 3 digits. Holy
Yeah, triple
moly.
digits. That's
I
cool.
know.
Woo!
All right. Y'all have the best life ever, okay? Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week as well as the rest of the network at exvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.